Thank you for joining us this evening for our second episode of the fall series of St. Ben's at Home. My name is Ann Sumigill, and I am the Director of Alumni Relations. Before we begin today's session, please note that there will be time for questions towards the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions for our presenter, please click the Ask a Question button at the bottom of your screen. Please note that you will need to exit out of the full screen view in order to see the Ask a Question button. This session will be recorded and posted on our Alum Learning Consortium's past event recordings page in 2 to 3 business days. Now, please welcome our moderator for today's session, Kathy Hansen, Vice President of Institutional Advancement.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this October edition of St. Ben's at Home, the second episode in our fall series. As you know, this fall we are framing each conversation around the theme of what it means to be a college for women. We know that something actually quite extraordinary happens when young women come to St. Ben's, they become Bennies, spend 4 years here, and then they graduate. And we really want to dig into kind of how that happens and why it happens, right? Each month between now and December, we'll be bringing in different voices around campus to have this conversation and to really ask about their reflections from their unique perspectives about what it means to be a college for women. Now, remember, you can watch all of the previous episodes on our Alumni Relations page on the website. We've provided a link to the board-approved statement on what it means to be a college for women. We'll share that link in our information at the end of this program. We'll also include the link in the evaluation email that you'll be receiving tomorrow, so you'll have a chance to read it for yourself if you haven't already. Now, tonight, we are delighted to welcome back our interim president, Laurie Hamen. Now, those of you who have been regular participants in St. Ben's at Home may remember that we invited President Hamen to appear with us on her very first day as interim president of St. Ben's on July 1st. So it's a pleasure to welcome her back again. And Laurie, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Kathy. It's been great to be with you. And this will be easy compared to that first day, right?
It'll be fun. We'll have a good time.
Absolutely.
Now, before we get into conversation with Laurie, I do have an assignment for you. We would love to hear your responses to the question, what is your hope for the Bennies, our current Bennies who are here right now, as they pursue their educations at a college for women? Again, that's what is your hope for our current Bennies as they pursue their educations at a college for women? Now, use the Ask a Question function. Post your response at any time during our program, and please include your name and class year. And later on in the Q&A portion of the episode, we'll be drawing on some of those responses as part of our conversation. Now, let's turn to Laurie and start the conversation. Our statement on what it means to be a college for women has really been, I think, St. Ben's stake in the ground about who St. Ben's is, what we are, what we stand for. I'd be interested in hearing from you kind of a larger perspective, like the national landscape of women's colleges. Is what we wrote in our statement, would that be in any way distinct or unique or different than what another women's college might write?
Well, lots of women's college have their stake in the ground as a matter of their own mission statement. I think one of the things that's really unique about St. Ben's is it's in our mission statement, but it's also very much fleshed out in what it means to be a college for women. And so having both, to me, really accentuates the importance of that for us. And they're always, all these statements or mission statements have a lot in common. One is that there's always a statement on reaching a woman's full potential. How can they, through leadership, role models, contribution, acknowledgement, valuing and amplifying, how can each student reach their full potential? And I can't think of a more worthy aspect of a mission statement, that each of your students would reach their full potential, particularly your women students. And then there's always a part of the statement that is about outcomes. What will happen to these women once they are invested in this particular way? And Our statement says that they'll think critically, they'll lead courageously, they'll advocate passionately, but each institution has a little bit different flavor on what they think the outcomes will be. I think the thing about our statement that is the most important is maybe over the last 60 years, about 85% of women's colleges have admitted men, have merged with another institution, or closed. And the first narrative we often hear about women's colleges is about decline. And that's rarely the narrative that women's college write for themselves. But our statement, in contrast, is really about the narrative of opportunity. What is the outcome of a women's college? What are they going to achieve? How can we continue to educate women every year, providing access and educational opportunities for women, and have a welcoming campus for women, developing women leaders, empowering them, and then helping them reach their full potential, each and every student. So in some ways, I think our statement is rather like women's colleges, but we share some incredible outcomes, and those are really rooted in our Catholic, Benedictine, residential, liberal arts traditions. Mm-hmm. And I think those are what makes the women's experience here at St. Ben's and our statement very special.
I love that idea of the narrative of opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
That's compelling language, I think. And it does make me wonder if that is something that maybe is, distinct, or something that maybe we do exceptionally well. At St. Ben's, is there a leadership role that St. Ben's can or should be playing nationally among women's colleges, and what might that look like?
Sure. Well, we're part of the Women's College Coalition, 36 very strong and proud women's institutions. And so absolutely, there really is a role for us. And it's a pretty small and elite group, but there is definitely a role for us. Over the past decade, St. Ben's really has played a leadership role in that agenda for the Women's College Coalition. And we've worked really tirelessly to be an active participant in that organization and contribute to the research that's being generated on colleges for women and women's experience. And I'm really proud to say that my own Chief of Staff, Catherine Enck, has authored a research project on access and opportunity at women's colleges that's going to be published next month. So we'll continue to contribute to the good thinking, as well as the execution of a really fantastic experience for women at a women's college. And, of course, I'm a proud graduate of a women's college, and I want nothing more than for us to have strength and opportunity for generations to come for women at St. Ben's.
I'm glad you mentioned the research that Catherine Enck has done. Catherine, of course, was our guest last month, along with trustee Mary Thompson, and she mentioned her research, and there was actually quite a bit of interest from the listeners about what that research was all about. So we may have to bring Catherine back.
She also has a really interesting 2016 magazine article that you can find on our website about why a women's college matter. And if any of you are interested in having very accessible language for 5 or 6 points, why does it matter so much? Take a look at that short article from our magazine in 2016, and maybe you can send that link out. But it's really helpful in identifying what are the outcomes, and they really are tremendous.
That's great. We will include a link to that article when we probably in the evaluation email that you get tomorrow. As I was thinking, as you were talking about kind of the national leadership role that St. Ben's can play, one of the ways I think we've really exhibited national caliber leadership has been on issues of access and equity. And so I think about our rankings nationally, our leadership on the American Talent Initiative, the rankings from the New York Times and the American Enterprise Institute on the mobility, the social and economic mobility that we provide for our students. So those are, we're being very highly ranked with some of the most elite institutions in the United States. And that brings me actually to my next question. When we think about our work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, we have very much focused, and rightly so, on racial and ethnic kind of identity. But I wonder, should we also be addressing sexism? and maybe understanding and implementing anti-sexist efforts toward that end. I mean, how could you imagine doing that? And what role does that have to play as we think about our diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work?
Sure. Well, when you think about what needs to take place in all of the work as it relates to equity and justice, you recognize that awareness and education is the basis on which individuals will make progress. And we do that every day. Awareness of women's rights, of women's issues, amplification of women's voices, all of those things are part of an awareness raising and education. But we also know that that embracing of a woman's experience can't just stop there. There are sexist structures and processes and so forth that we have to dismantle actively. And in the same way that we need to be an anti-racist campus and a multicultural campus, we need to also be an anti-sexist campus. Again, it starts with awareness and education, but it also really we need to examine all of the processes and decisions that we make in light of our special mission. And I think that's the only way to become an anti-sexist campus, is to examine those structures and then actively fight against them and teach women how to do that for themselves in their workplaces, in their families, in their communities in times to come.
That's interesting. And that's one thing I think we've learned through the Becoming Community issue is the importance program on campus. It's the importance of that being kind of self-critical, right? And to be able to look kind of honestly at ourselves, and then in a way that can lead to transformation into the kind of community that we want to be. So that's really interesting. I want to go back to the statement itself and kind of draw something out a little bit. So the statement speaks very intentionally and focuses on the experiences that we want our students to have. I mean, what do we want them to have? How do we want our students to be shaped by those experiences? And that's very appropriate and obviously key toward our mission as a college. But I'm wondering, if you take a step back, does the statement actually have broader impact, right? And I'm thinking of our alumni. So as you think about our statement, are there aspects of that statement that really could speak to our alums and their work in the world?
Yes. I don't think there's any doubt that this statement provides a framework for life, and particularly the workplace for our alumni. The statement talks about 3 or 4 really distinct aspects: our commitments, the ways that we amplify the advocacy that we do, and the development that we do as a college community. But that can easily be translated into the workplace, into the family. How does one, with a particular history that one has, or the particular workplace history that one has, how does one make a commitment to the development of women, all women? How does one live the Benedictine values of dignity of work and respect for persons and listening, and make a commitment that will clearly assist women in developing? And then how does one amplify the voices of women? How does one advocate for that in their own workplace? And how does one develop women leaders? If they just took the last paragraph and said, how might I, as an alum of a women's college who have had a rich, wonderful experience of being developed while at St. Ben's, how might I do that for another woman leader or many women leaders? I often say to students, when you're sitting in my chair or that chair over there, and help them to imagine themselves as the leader of an organization, I'm making a commitment to developing their experience, their aspirations, helping them go further than they thought they were going to go. And I can tell you, after doing that, and I know alums do that every single day, raising the aspirations of young women that they might have an opportunity to commit to, advocate for, amplify, and mentor, it provides a sense of mentorship and sponsorship that cannot be replaced, and is probably what the alums have experienced at St. Ben's, and might be able to write their own statement based upon the words that we've written here, but also the concepts of commitment, advocacy, and development for the women that they have in their lives. So I hope that each of you think about yourself in the role of extending what St. Ben's might have done for you. I know that when I left my women's institution, I felt a commitment to pay it forward with other young women. And I'm hoping that our alums will take this statement on the meaning of a college for women and extend it into their own lives. I know they do it every day, and maybe they'll do it with as much intentionality as it has been done for them.
I think that's really great. And one of the, I think, wonderful things about St. Ben's for our students is that they see women in the most senior, obviously from the president on down, women in these incredibly important leadership roles. So people are watching, right? And they're watching our alums, and to kind of use that. It's also kind of a great opportunity to give a plug to our alumni mentor program. And, reach out to Val Jones or Ann Sumagill, and we can get you connected up there as well.
You can't, I don't think an alum could even possibly imagine the impact that them telling their story to another student will have on that student's life. The thinking is always, well, if they can do it, I might be able to also. And you just swing wide open the door of opportunity for young women when you tell your story.
That's great. I'm glad you're encouraging that, because a lot of us have internalized this sort of Midwestern modesty, right? And we really have to kind of be open and vulnerable, I think, in sharing those stories of our own journeys and our own leadership, and realize that they have impact on others.
They have tremendous impact. And we might have the double humble problem, the Minnesota humble problem and the Benedictine humble problem, where we kind of think, well, it's certainly, it's just, this is just what we do. And actually it is a life-changing, transformational, you have a life-changing, transformational story.
One of the things we did in that statement about what it means to be a college for women is to name it, right? And that's what we can do as individuals. We found, actually, just in the short time, it's really only been a few months since the board approved that statement on what it means to be a college for women. And yet during that time, it's been incredibly powerful for us to use in our own work, and the response that we've gotten from alums and students and others has been really important. And it does make me wonder, where's St. John's in all of this? How does that, how do we play together on this,
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think that St. John's is a great partner for us in this, because they have a special mission also. As a college for men, they have a tremendously special mission. While they don't have a statement yet, I'm very hopeful that that will come. I know that it's in the works. And I think that raising the consciousness of how you might be working as in that special mission as with a college for men will be good to get down on a piece of paper. I also think, though, that as we move towards a stronger integration with St. Ben's and St. John's, we bring this aspect of what it means to be a college for women distinctly to our partnership. And I'm very heartened by seeing that as sort of two pillars, strong integration between the two and a strong character of a women's institution, a Benedictine women's institution. That to me is our strength. That we can be who we are. The statement says it very clearly, and we can bring our best self to that partnership. I think that St. John's is really thinking about their statement and how to make very conscious their own very important and special mission. And we'll bring both of those two things to the partnership of stronger integration.
Well, since you mentioned stronger integration, I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. I mean, one of the reasons that we've talked about that we're pursuing stronger integration with St. John's is that it's going to, a more integrated approach to our leadership will allow us to be more flexible, more timely, more effective in our decision making. I mean, that's a really important outcome that we're hoping to see from stronger integration. I think a hallmark of that is going to be represented by a single, common president for both St. John's and St. Ben's. Now, what are the other elements of strong integration that are sort of important to you as you think about this? What's top of mind as you're leading our effort along with the board towards stronger integration?
So when I look at the strategic directions 2020, I think about the phrase shared future, sustainable future. And higher education just frankly is changing tremendously and moving fast. And there's a lot of headwinds against us in higher education at this moment, particularly a rural liberal arts college, residential one. And so I think being able to be nimble and be able to, kind of create a future and a path that has the least amount of barriers and difficulties. And so moving ahead with one single president to me is very much about a shared future and a sustainable future. But there's also many other aspects of stronger integration that are extraordinarily important. Part of the governance process is two boards that are the same, made up of the same people. And I do believe that they'll have very specific responsibilities to each of the institutions, but it provides for some nimbleness, for some ability to plan and move forward in a shared and sustainable future. There's also many services and both back of the house and sort of front of the house parts of the organizations that are not joint right now. And we're investigating how those areas might be brought more closely together. It gives us an opportunity to examine our administration, how we operate. And clearly our faculty has been joined for about 40 years. And so they're actually quite a bit ahead. So I think the faculty and the board are maybe a little bit ahead, and we're examining what kinds of administrative structure changes might be helpful as we move closer and closer together. And frankly, it's been a joy to be a part of. Anytime that you're working to try to make your institution stronger and better for the future, while there's difficulty in change, I think it's also enthusiasm producing. And it's very much the strength of who we are. We have two institutions, and they are better together than they ever could possibly be apart. We have special missions, we have to keep those, but the stronger that we can move together and the more willing we are as partners, I think the better off we'll be in the higher ed market in the future.
That's really important. And I think to lay that up alongside the very strong statements that you've already made about the importance of our own identity as a college.
Most definitely.
Bennies have a strong Benny identity, which is absolutely wonderful. And we know that Bennies want to make a difference too. So as we're moving towards strong integration, what are the most important things you ask of alumni, I guess, to help care for St. Ben's during this time, this very time full of change, but also this time of moving towards stronger integration? What do you think is most important from our alums?
There's so many things that our alums do for us right now. And I'll say 3 or 4 that I think are probably the most impact to us. One you've already heard about, and that is an alum mentor program. To tell your story, to be present to our students as a part of entering into that sisterhood with them is extraordinarily important. I would say that certainly if you're in the position to give, we ask a lot, and I hope that falls on a grateful heart for what's happened at St. Ben's over many, many years. So many of you have given so generously. I think just of the day of giving a few days ago, and how incredible that was. Just the incredible outpouring of generosity was tremendous. If you can be a part of that, I want you to be a part of that, because it's such an uplift. Mm-hmm. I think the third thing that I would say, and something that I'd like to talk about a little bit, is our alumni referral program, which Kathy will probably ask me about in a little bit. But I think last but not least, I'm a person of faith. Many people who have gone to St. Ben's are people of faith. And this is really a time of prayer and contemplation in the best Benedictine fashion. Be thinking about your alma mater and how you might keep us front and center as you pray for the future, for the election, for all the changes that are about to take place in our world. You can remember us also.
We covet those prayers.
We do, absolutely. And we know that we are so fortunate to be a part of a Benedictine community where prayer and contemplation and the respect of persons is of utmost value to us. And we know that that's not how the world works. And so we covet your prayers as we try to model something really important in a time of change and a time of sometimes dramatic upheaval. We really covet your prayers. But I wanted to go back to alumni referral because I think that that's probably something important, probably one of the most important things. And I wanted to lay down a little bit of a challenge, Kathy, if you don't mind, if I say that right now. We have a program of alumni referring students to come to St. Ben's. And I think last year we had about 360 or so alums that referred a student, and they applied to St. Ben's. And I'm really astonished, but about 40% of them, just a little bit over 40% of them, went from application to becoming a student. Right. That is an unbelievable record. Now, those students we know are retained through graduation at a rate that's about 5 to 6% percentage points higher than anyone else. And so your influence as an alum causes people to apply and come to St. Ben's and graduate in very much higher numbers. So my goal is to have about double the number of alum referrals this fall that we had last fall. I'd love to say that we could have about 800 or so alum referrals next year. And that probably requires people to, if you have maybe referred a student to St. Ben's before, refer more than one. Or if you have friends who are tremendous alums, but they've never referred anyone, that would be something that everybody can do. Talk about your experience to people. And you'll be surprised what your influence will do, that there will be people who will graduate from college because of you.
That's great that you lifted that up. And I want to remind everyone that a significant part of Laurie's background and expertise is in enrollment management. So she's really expert in this. And I know she latched right on to that statistic when she saw the difference that our alums make, not only in attracting students to St. Ben's, as Laurie said, but they actually stay at St. Ben's at a higher rate and graduate at a higher rate. So if an alum wants to make a big impact on St. Ben's, being a part of that program is super important. So you'll be hearing more about that as we move on. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I want to circle back to something we were talking about a little bit earlier, and it relates to the pandemic, what's going on right now in the world around us, right? So the data is pretty clear. The research has been pretty clear, and what I've been reading at least lately, that women have been particularly and perhaps disproportionately affected by the pandemic, both in their sort of personal home lives, but also professionally. And there's lots of reasons for all of that. It got me to thinking about whether there was something about a St. Ben's education that was kind of a value add, right? As women are facing some really unusual challenges as a result of the pandemic, and how they're trying to manage to keep all these aspects of their lives kind of together and moving forward. I wonder what you might think about that.
Yeah, I think resilience is, built into a St. Ben's education. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We build resilient people at St. Ben's. And I think right now in a COVID pandemic, there's nothing but the grit and resilience that are keeping many women who are juggling an amazing amount of responsibilities, work, and perhaps they're also homeschooling their children and trying to be good neighbors and helping their extended families. But when I think about the way that we have trained students, and our mission statement says that we're going to lead courageously. And I think I said this in July, but I want to say it about our alums. A time of pandemic, a national emergency, a situation we've never, ever seen before, most of us, requires us to think critically, to lead courageously, and to advocate passionately. And while I think in this time right now that feels very tiring, for many women, because they're expected to do it all, the sense of resilience and responsibility that's built into one human being at St. Ben's, the sense of being able to change, to think about situations from all different sides, and to lead courageously is probably absolutely matched to the difficulties of a pandemic. And so I guess I would say we all probably need to try to get enough sleep, but I think we have to have deep confidence in the fact that the skills that we have are the ones that we need. And that a pandemic requires courageous leadership. It requires sisterhood and a team of people that can be in your corner when you really need them. And to count on the strength that you've developed over the years, particularly at St. Ben's. So certainly if we can be of help, we would and we will. But also I want people to have deep confidence that they are enough, their training is enough. And that sense of grit and resilience is built in, as well as the family that you have, the sisters that you have from St. Ben's.
I think that's great. I'm so glad you mentioned the sisterhood of Benny's, and that's an asset that we can really rely on.
Oh goodness, yes.
In these times, and I see examples of it just all the time, of Benny's supporting other Benny's that way. That's terrific. I also want to talk about you visited with our alumni board in September.
Yes.
I'm sure you remember that. And during that meeting, you mentioned how you wanted to sort of uncover and name the aspects of the St. Ben's identity that we would not trade for anything, right? It's those absolute essential kind of qualities of what it means to be St. Ben's. And I just wanted to ask you, what are those qualities for you, and how are you going about uncovering them?
You know, it's interesting because I think that there's a tremendous amount of unity in what people say that they would not trade for anything. And in fact, I was just reading a part on our website that says, that's when I knew I should come to women's college. But and a lot of it is very much when they knew, like, this is the sisterhood that I need. This is the confidence I need. These are the role models that I need. This is the way of developing my voice that I need. But when I talk to alums, I'm surprised at the consistency of what they say. But it's also very interesting. I'm also really intrigued by, and I have not yet gotten my arms completely around it, the way that the individuals who are alums develop over time their interest in looking back on their experience at St. Ben's. So if you, as a 22-year-old, you might think one thing particularly about your experience that you would not trade under any circumstances. And then if you talk to 60, 70, 80, 90-year-old alums, they will say something extraordinarily different when they look back at their experience. It's almost like there's a progressive experience. And I can't tell if that is just ages of life, stages of life, types of roles that you might have, moving up in various roles that you might have, leadership roles. But it's clear that one values their women's college education differently as they get older. But the unity of the kinds of things that people remember in terms of being respected and being able to use their voice, understanding what leadership is by watching it and by practicing it. That is a constant theme. Having a role model and being able to practice in a non-competitive environment, in a collaborative environment. The ability to have sisters with whom you will bounce off ideas and decide which ones are good and which ones are not so good. All of those things are clearly sort of areas of value, but it's really interesting how they change over time. So a person who's a 60-year-old CEO might see that differently than a 22-year-old in terms of role models, in terms of leadership practice. They might see it differently, but it's still extraordinarily important. So I think I have a lot more work to do and a lot more listening to do. I have categories of real importance, but I want to know more about how that changes over time and what it is that we should not ever give up. It's very interesting to do this work because it is of such great importance to our alumni. And I want to make sure we get this really right as we move towards stronger integration.
I want to, that may be a challenge to some of our listeners. You might even share in the ask a question comment what you think those things are that
yes, please.
You would not trade for anything. That would be really helpful. And I want to kind of wrap up this part of our program because I want to make sure we allow time for questions and answers here. So I just want to give like a really quick couple of questions because people might be wondering, how are things going on campus this fall, right? With our students and faculty. One question about the classroom, basically. I think everyone knows that we went to quite a radical change in our academic calendar this year. We're using a block plan, which means we teach one course at a time throughout the year. So how's that working?
Yeah, it's actually been superb. Our faculty did an amazing job, really in two aspects of preparing the classroom for COVID, many aspects, but two specifically. One is developing their courses into a block schedule. So each of our courses, one at a time, block A, B, C, and D in a semester, one course at a time. A faculty person had to take all of their courses and decide how to deliver it in 3-hour blocks for 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. That is a monumental amount of work. And when I've told my colleagues at other institutions that our faculty did that, they were absolutely astonished. And then I said, oh, and by the way, we also installed all kinds of technology. So if a student was quarantined and or isolated, then they could also join in a hybrid fashion if they chose to do that or if they needed to do that. Well, colleagues are absolutely astonished. How could you do both things? How did your faculty do that? They have just been amazing. And because of that block plan, we were able to have enough classrooms to spread people out 6-foot distance, mask everyone. And we've done all of our own testing and contact tracing. And one of the things that we have found is there have been zero cases of COVID amongst our faculty and staff that are absolutely traced to the classroom, not one. And I'm very, and knock on wood, that will continue that, but I'm very happy that the way that we have arranged the classroom have kept our faculty and staff safe from COVID and have helped our students not transmit the disease to anyone else in the classroom. And for that, I am extraordinarily grateful. The block plan is cut down on busing back and forth. Mm-hmm. And we've been able to very clearly understand who has been with who when you're only in one class. It's provided our students with grades earlier. And I think motivated them to continue good work in the classroom. And I think it's, if you're going to make a change to a liberal arts setting, make one that ensures academic quality. And I think the block plan has done that. The hybrid learning has done that. When asked if our students wanted to, be released from their housing contract, only a very few decided to do that. The vast majority of students are in class, safe, and working very, very hard in very unusual circumstances. So it's been a real thing of beauty.
It's a testament to a lot of people's hard work. And before we turn it over to our audience to ask some questions, I've got one final question that we're asking of all of our guests at these programs. And that is, what is your favorite place on campus?
My favorite place on campus, well, of course, I have to give more than one, but my favorite place on campus is the fish pond. And you can look straight down the sidewalk at the fish pond and you can see the grotto and the cemetery. And it's really, that's just an important place to me. You can go the other way and look at the main building, but it reminds me of natural beauty, which is clearly a part of our campus, of history, and of our tradition of being a Catholic Benedictine institution. It's like you look down the sidewalk from the fish pond and you see all of the things that we hold really dear. And I like that. I also like to stand outside of Gretzky and see the action.
Yeah.
your students everywhere. And so I like the action, but if I want just peace, history, and a real feeling of St. Ben's natural beauty, I stand by the fish pond and look down there.
That's a lovely answer. So now I want to turn it over to you who've been listening and watching tonight for your questions. And remember, you can continue to post your responses to the question, what's your hope for our current Bennies who are studying here at St. Ben's right now. So Anne, do we have any questions that folks have submitted?
We do, and we have some statements too. And before I mention the first statement, I do want to remind folks that if you do have questions for our presenter, please click on the Ask a Question button at the bottom of your screen. And if you are in full screen mode, you'll have to exit out of that to access that. So we have a statement from Becky from the class of 1992. She says, I hope that Bennies will continue to experience the unique CSB community even after they are no longer on campus. The 4-year experience needs to remain robust and continually evolve to carry through to life after graduation.
Great. I could not agree more. And when I see our students becoming alums, the relationships they have with their classmates, the difference they're making in their workplaces and their communities and their parishes. I know that students are seeing their Benny experience as a seamless experience moving into the future. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And I think it's true and continues to happen, but we'll continue to encourage that as well.
Anne, are there more responses or questions from the audience?
Yes. I have another statement from Teresa from the class of 1996. She says, I hope that the CSB community of young women students are nurtured and challenged to grow as lifelong learners and continue to find and strengthen their voices as women.
Great. Yes. You know, the sort of practicing and learning and amplifying the voice of women is such a central characteristic of St. Ben's. Learning to speak up, not just in classes, but in political discussions with your roommates, in extracurricular activities, in a study abroad situation with people who have different viewpoints than you do. I'm thrilled that students have so many ways to be able to practice speaking out and defending their arguments and understanding who they are more and more every single day. So that will never change. That will always be a part. And I think it's also going to be always incumbent upon the faculty and staff who work here to help students go further than they even think they can go. A lot of students do a little self-limiting. And so part of learning to speak your mind is knowing that other people believe in you, maybe even more than you believe in yourself. I know that was a real issue for me, and I know it is for other women students, is that they'll go as far as they think they ought to go, or maybe the voice in their head tells them to go. But as soon as they meet a faculty or staff person who believes that they could go further, their horizons are forever changed. I think that's one way that our alums can also be a part of that, is mentoring young women and giving them an aspirational mentorship, telling them that they can do things they never thought they could do, might be a part of even accentuating the voice that they can develop as young women. So be involved.
I'm going to add a shameless plug too for
Please.
lifelong learning for our alumni. You may be aware, but if you're not, you should be, that we offer kind of a range of virtual kind of professional development webinars through our alumni relations program. So it's a great way to just do a little, hour-long, 45-minute long session on various topics that are relevant to women's lives and work. We also have our online Benny Book Club. So I think all of that we try to make it possible for our Bennies to be lifelong learners and help to provide avenues by which they can develop that. Mm-hmm. Anne, other questions or comments?
Yes, actually, two Bennies wrote a very similar question. So I'll just read one of them. Where is the joint president search at in the process since it was announced in April? And what are the chances that the first joint president will be a woman?
Well, I'll say where it is at the moment. There's a few things that need to happen before we can start a search for the new single president for St. John's of St. Ben's. And that is, we need to make an application for our Higher Learning Commission, our accrediting body, because in order to have one president, we need to describe the relationship between the two institutions and how that president might operate. There are a few legal and regulatory issues that we are still working through at this point in time, so we have not yet made that application. At the point where we make that application, which we think will be shortly, we will be able to start a search for the president. We have engaged a search firm, but we have not yet made that application. So once we do that, we'll engage that search firm even further. I know that the faculty is already thinking about the characteristics that they want for that new president. And so once that application is made, then we'll do a search. We will not be able to offer someone the job until that application has a positive outcome from the Higher Learning Association, but we will obviously do a great job of that application, and it's nearly finished except for the few legal and regulatory issues that we still have. We hope to complete that sometime in the next few months. Then we'll conduct the search, and that usually takes between 6 and 8 months or so to conduct a search like that in a very rigorous way and to find a great candidate, so which we feel confident that we will. Whether that person will be a woman, I just couldn't say. I really don't know, but I know that they will have to love St. Ben's and they have to love St. John's. And so I don't know what the chances are. I suspect that we will get someone who is really fantastic. And I know people are committed to that search and making it absolutely great for both institutions. I don't think we'll rest until we find someone who will be fantastic for both.
Thanks, Laurie. Anne?
Yes, this question is from Mary. She's wondering, could you comment, Laurie, on how students are doing right now? How is their mental health and their physical health?
Yeah, I'll start with the physical health. I am absolutely impressed with how our Benny community has taken care of themselves and each other. I'm astonished. Today was 6 inches of snow, so maybe we have a little less outside activity today than we might have had at another time. But I'm astonished at the amount of students who are out getting exercise, just having community with one another, walking, biking, running, really taking care of their physical health and taking care of their social needs with another person or two or three. And so I think that always is beneficial when you see people really attempting to try to take care of themselves in times of difficulty. Certainly, we've seen an uptick in people who are using our mental health services. We have extensive mental health services we have monitored to make sure that students can access those services, specific services, both in health and wellness and mental health counseling. I think overall, our students are doing rather well under the circumstances. We see lots of students accessing our health service, being tested for COVID, doing their symptom tracker every day, talking with counselors, talking with our nurses and nurse practitioners within the health service. And so I think they're doing all of the right things. One course at a time is stressful. Being in a community in a pandemic is also stressful, and not being able to go to the large type of events that you're used to going to, and maybe even not being able to go home like you're used to is stressful. But I think we've put out a lot of messages of support, a lot of messages asking students to care for one another and themselves at a time of pandemic. And we've made our services even more accessible than they normally are, hired more people and have more to, for people to actually access. So I think that they're doing rather well. They say that we do something every first Friday of every block called your First Friday Evaluation. And we ask students how they're doing academically, how they think their classes are going, whether or not they need assistance, do they need an internet connection, what do they need to excel in the classroom, and then we follow up specifically with each one of those individuals in the classroom that need something to succeed academically. There's no better time for us to have our advocates for inclusive mentoring, people who want to help you do something. But overall, I think our students are doing rather well in accessing the kind of services that we hope that they would access. I'm often astounded too at what can happen on Zoom and how people can connect on Zoom. Again, sometimes when you're on it 6 or 7 hours a day, you don't always see the connections, but I think for students, it has provided a connection that they need, not just with one another, but with their parents, with family and friends outside of the institution, and also with their faculty and staff members who might need to connect with them in non-physical ways.
I think it's important too for everyone to know that our student development team, I think, has just gone above and beyond.
Amazing.
Providing a lot of kind of social and community activities, all of course in like responsible ways, masked and using social distancing and all of that. But I think some people think, well, you know, given the pandemic, maybe not much is happening. And actually that's not true. We have a pretty rich array of programming that students can take part in too, because, you know, after they're done with their 3 hours in class and, you know, they're studying, there's still a lot of time, and we want to make sure that they have, you know, ways to be a part of community that are helpful to them. So it's important to know they've done a really great job.
Mm-hmm.
Anne, are there other questions?
We do. We have a question from Deb. She says, my daughter is an RA this year and enjoying the challenge. She happens to be on a floor that's also a quarantine floor. How are you helping those who live in a safe and a quarantine side by side, safe in quotes, quarantine in quotes, side by side?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think our students actually have done a very, very good job of following the protocol that we ask them to follow in isolation or quarantine. Now, quarantine, for those of you who don't know, is a person who has a close contact of somebody who might have tested positive for COVID. Right now, we are very much seeing our quarantine spaces go down. And here's the reason. We finally have been able to get all the reagents to be able to test on campus with the instant test, with this test that will give you results in 15 minutes. So in the past, where we've had students who are close contacts and having to be in quarantine for a long period of time and maybe awaiting test results, we're no longer having to do that, because now test results aren't coming back in 2 and 3 days, they're coming back in 15 minutes. So in the past, we've had lots of people in quarantine that were awaiting test results, and we're not having that anymore. For about the past week and a half or two, we've been able to test everyone in the clinic and get immediate results rather than to put them in quarantine and have lots of people in quarantine. So the people who are in quarantine now are people who maybe are close contacts but have not yet been tested or something like that. So I think we're trying to diminish the amount of people who are in quarantine. We'll always have people in isolation. We have fairly low numbers right now. But I think we're trying to even, tamp down a little bit so that we can put all of our quarantine spaces in spaces that are further away from other students. And quarantine spaces are not necessarily people who are positive. They're people who are close contacts. And so, we've done some work as it relates to air handling and so forth. So we know students aren't coming out of their rooms. We don't want students to be breathing the same air as someone who is in quarantine or isolation. So we've done some work to try to make sure there really is a very good separation between people who are close contacts and in isolation or quarantine, and people who are well. The Minnesota Department of Public Health has helped us tremendously in determining what is the appropriate quarantine space and what is the appropriate isolation space. And one of the things that they've told us is that if people are masked and 6 foot socially distant and have not had 15 minutes of contact, that the chances of them being able to pass COVID-19 is very small. And so we use that as a standard all the time. 6 foot distance and masked, and less than 15 minutes of contact is the chances are very, very, very small. So we're following Minnesota Department of Public Health and CDC guidelines to the letter. We've asked them to come and check on our facilities, which they have done. And we aren't seeing any kind of transmission between quarantine and isolation space and our healthy students. And so we'd really like to keep it that way. We impress upon students that how much their responsibility equals health for their fellow students. And so far our students have responded in kind.
Great. Thank you. Anne, do you have some more questions or responses to the question?
I do have one more response, and we do have time for this last one. It's from Kate from the class of 1982. She says, Laurie, as a recently retired CEO and 60-year-old, I hope that students are prompted to learn about, reflect on, and understand their unique experience in the moment. Your statement about looking back on our experience resonates with me. You just named something that I may not have been able to name. I appreciate my experience more now than ever.
Yeah, I'm a class of 82 grad from a women's institution, and I can tell you in my 20s, I thought one thing. That was a really great experience. I really learned a lot. In my 30s, I said, I can't believe these people are still my friends. I have learned so much from them. In my 40s, I said, oh, wait a minute. Leadership is hard. Remember what I learned there? I mean, every decade, it seemed like there was more and more richness on which to rely. And I hope our students, I believe our students, and when I talk to alums, I know our alumni see that decade by decade growth in their experience. I tell students all the time, my job is to make your degree worth more. And I think with alums, my job is to make sure that you can reflect on your experience every day and say that I'm glad I went to Saint Ben's. It helped me, not only me personally, but also in my leadership, in my community service, in my job, and that you can look back on it with pride and gratitude.
That's terrific. And is that our last response, last question?
Yes, that was the last one, Kathy.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for being a part of this conversation tonight. Thank you, Laurie. That's all the time we have for this evening. So we're going to, Laurie and I will leave right now, but please stay on. You can listen to Anne give you some closing remarks and some information about the upcoming episode, which Kate will, next month's episode will feature students, leaders from our student leaders from the Institute for Women's Leadership. And it would be great to ask them to reflect on this and what they mean. So we'll look forward to that, and Anne will give you more information. Thank you, Anne. We'll turn it over to you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Kathy and Laurie, for your time this evening. Audience, you can share additional questions or comments on tonight's episode through the evaluation form that will be emailed to you by the Alumni Relations team. Please join us next month on Tuesday, November 17th, when we will hear directly from students about what attending college for women means to them. We will be hearing from student leaders from the Saint Ben Senate, the Sister Nancy Hines Institute for Women's Leadership, and the Advocates for Inclusive Mentoring. You won't want to miss an opportunity to hear from today's current Bennies. We are able to offer this online event free of charge due to the generous support from alumni and friends. If you're interested in ensuring that programs like Saint Ben's at Home continue, please go to givecsb.com and make a gift. And special thank you to all who gave financial support during last week's record-setting Give CSB Day. You can find additional details about the St. Ben's at Home series on the landing page listed here. We'll also share this link in the evaluation email you will receive tomorrow. Thank you all for attending and have a great night.